What's up, party people? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. We're back at it again. Today I've got I think 2 or 3 guests. The first one's gonna be a really, really exciting one. I'm been looking forward to it for a week or two now. It's with a lady named Idil. I'm maybe pronouncing it not correctly. But she has spent more than 20 years studying one question, which is how people actually decide and what makes them trust an idea enough to act on it. Um, what gives them trust? What makes them trust an idea enough to act on it? She built a career at the intersection of research, media, and marketing. Her latest book, her second book, is called AI for Marketing: The Consumer Perspective. And in a field crowded with builders and models, she's the rare voice speaking for the person on the other side of the screen. So, I'm gonna bring on Idil. Idil, am I saying it right?
Yeah, you're good.
Idil. Okay, good. Okay, good. So where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn. Nice. I was telling you the other day, I think in the next couple of weeks, I might be making a trip out there. I want to take
Oh,
the
cool.
little ones. Yeah, I'm long overdue. But maybe kick us off with what is Iris Flex? I don't know, like the short and sweet version. We'll obviously like double click and go deeper into it, kind of the last third of the
Yeah,
interview. But yeah, let's make sure we begin with the end in mind here. Where are we
yeah,
going with what you're building?
definitely. Well, Iris Flex, here we go. It's an audience intelligence firm. I started about a couple years ago, and we focus on exactly the question you were just talking about: how people decide and take action. What mobilizes them? So we're constantly asking this kind of question to any kind of population, working with brands around the world. Yeah, it's basically a audience intelligence firm doing research on consumers.
Interesting. And I guess like what's the book about in a nutshell? AI for marketing, the consumer perspective. Like what are, I don't know, kind of the three key bullet
Right.
points, that you're trying to make there?
Yeah. Well, the impetus for the book is the distance between the business of AI and the consumers of AI. There is a gap, which I'm coining as the AI gap, where the business is investing quite a large sum of investment in workflows, in operations, in product services, advertising. And I was noticing that people, the end users, were feeling a little scared to jump in, not trusting what they were seeing. And the big question I had was, well, if there's a lack of trust, then how can we sell? Because trust is the quintessential thing you need to sell something. So that was the big question that I started with. And then the second question that I started answering in the book is, where are the opportunities? Because there's always someone somewhere who's doing something different than the crowd. And who is trusting AI? How come they're trusting AI? That turned out to be pretty interesting. Things that I found that were counterintuitive are all in the book. Like, optimists have a leg up over everyone. If you're an optimist, you take risks and you're not afraid to fail. So people with an optimistic attitude, whether they're an employee or a customer, they'll be more likely to try your product. They'll be more likely to jump into your AI program, so on and so forth. And then the third big question that I'm answering in the book is, well, now that you have this lay of the land, how do you mobilize people to participate? And the answer is you adjust your communications according to each group's needs, fears, wants, and that all comes down to really understanding your audience.
Interesting. And I guess by the end of this interview, what will people walk away with? Like, I mean, we're saying here that 4 in 5 people don't trust AI. A lot of people are obviously building with AI, in
Right.
AI, for AI. So like, I guess, what are they're gonna understand essentially how to turn that 4 in 5 maybe to, I don't know, 2 in 5 or something?
So, right, and hopefully more. You'll walk away with an understanding of the ins and outs of the landscape, the pluses and the minuses, and have an idea as to how to move forward. Because you can't bring everyone on board at once, but then you'll understand the nuances, maybe the segments within your audience, who's an avoider, who's an experimenter, who's integrating, who's a power user, and then think through strategies for each and have a map in your head, if you will, as to how to go to market. You there? I think we froze a little bit.
I've seen that before, but anyways, is what it is. So I was going to ask you something. I guess you were kind of saying you didn't want to talk about the education stuff, but I love,
All right, go for it.
people's story arc, right? Like how they landed where they landed.
Sure.
Oh my God! Speaking of landing, let's talk about landing. This is Daniel. He was also very curious about this question, so we thought he'd make a guest appearance. So you grew up in Istanbul before landing at Bryn Mawr, right, to study sociology. Right. And so what pulled you from Istanbul to a small college in Pennsylvania, and what were you like as a student back then?
I am a firm believer in media effects. So I watched a lot of 90210 growing up, the original show, and I thought my life was going to be just like that if I came to the States, and that's the true story. So I applied, got a scholarship, and I ended up at Bryn Mawr, which I love. I mean, and there's not a day that goes by to this day, to this age, that where I don't thank my education from Bryn Mawr.
And sociology is what the study of how people behave in groups, right? Which is basically the thread running through your whole career. Like, was that a deliberate choice at 18, or something you only saw looking back?
There was a class, the professor has passed away, unfortunately, by Judy Porter, Society, Culture, and Individual. And I saw that in the course guidebook, and I said, that is it. That is exactly the set of things that I'm interested in: society, culture, and individual. And it was an incredibly difficult introductory class that forced me to do a field study. I had to go interview students at 3 different schools and measure, all for the practice of learning how to do a field study. And in the end, had to write a 30-page paper. So the joke at the school was like, if you survive through that, you might as well major in it. And that's how I became a sociology major. It was an incredibly difficult but valuable lesson in how to ask the bright research questions, how to implement your questions to a measurable format, and then how to, most importantly, read insights from that. So that gave me like the archetype for my education, and then later for my career.
So what was the question about people or media that you were actually chasing when you decided to go deeper?
I was always interested in media effects, because if you study enough, like you start to specialize, and then at some point you want to ask more and more specific questions about areas of interest. And I was always fascinated by how you can move a crowd with just a message, like just a headline. And I guess I was always interested in advertising effects. And I even put together little campaigns on campus, applied to the different programs, failed initially, and then but found myself at the communication school at Annenberg at University of Pennsylvania, which was also a remarkable period in my life, because I loved studying media effects, communication. It blended very well with my sociology background. And then when it came time to apply all that, I found myself in market research.
Oh, fascinating. So early on, you ran the knowledge department think tank at Burson and led digital at Golden. Was that true?
Right. So I didn't run the knowledge development practice, but I did have that position before leaving. Yeah.
And before influencer was like a job title, you were mapping how, I guess, ideas spread between people, and like what did you see in those years that kind of the industry missed?
So I was lucky enough to graduate at a time when digital was becoming a real business. And I had a lot of knowledge. Speaking of all that education, I had a lot of knowledge. I had little experience. And maybe this is advice for the young graduates. I could only go into an area I felt where other people didn't have as much experience, because I kept getting the answer of like, yeah, you have a master's degree, but you don't have experience. So I went in specifically to back then into something related to e-commerce. My first job was being an internet analyst, and started understanding how people were adopting something super new, things they didn't know about, things that could, give them negative effects, like privacy issues were abound at the time. This is a time when people were just starting to use their credit cards online and scale. AOL was still sending out discs to get people on board, etc. But it taught me this view of how people approach emerging technologies, and how emerging technology becomes a mainstream technology. And catching that inflection point is so important for businesses, because you don't want to be there once it's become mainstream, then you're just competing against the masses. You want to be there right as it's emerging and becoming mainstream, so that you catch the momentum. So working with a lot of different brands, media brands, especially I was a media and entertainment analyst, and seeing them transform from old school media broadcasting into digital entities, that was fascinating. And that became like the bed of my career. I took that into Burson, who the company was at the time really invested in thought leadership platforms. And one of the platforms they had was about online influencers. So this is when blogs were becoming real entities, like Huffington Post was launching as a real media entity, and the whole landscape was changing. And the power of the word, or what we take for granted probably today in social media, was shifting to people from organizations. So again, a big landscape change. So e-commerce, social media, and now AI. This is my third big landscape change, and I'm seeing some commonalities across the board, and some differences, of course.
Interesting. So your first book back in 2010 was about word of mouth, finding influencers and getting people to carry a story. Reading it now, how much of that still holds, and what did the internet get to before you did?
I think a lot of it holds at a human level. I mean, the way an idea spreads is still fundamentally the same. There are people who know more about a topic than everybody else. They say, well, have you heard about this kind of thing? Whether they say it in person, whether they say it online, the word spreads, and good word travels, bad word travels even faster. I think those dynamics are still the same. And I was just reading a study shared online by through Ed Keller, a phenomenal researcher of many years. He was noting a YouGov study saying that friends and family referrals and recommendations are still the number one source for shopping. So you can do all that investment in advertising, all that investment in media buys, but you still have to be mindful of the word on the street and what people say to each other. Because ultimately what your friend recommends might be even more powerful than what the brand tells you. Or the best thing is when what your friend tells you matches with what the brand tells you and what you feel and experience. Off little student goes. So I still think it applies at a fundamental level. And of course, the influencer industry has changed so much since then. Now it's institutionalized. I mean, there are people who are making serious investments and serious money out of it. We all follow an influencer or two at least in a given area. So it's become much more of a organized industry and a machine than back when it was just emerging. So that's also, exciting to watch.
And kind of looking at that, whole arc, right, from sociology to word of mouth to audience intelligence, like what part of your early background do you lean on most in the work you do today?
The one thing I lean on a lot is articulating a question. And I think that's what we were taught in school, which I'm so grateful for, because you can study this, that, but you're not going to remember all the theory. You're not going to remember all your equations and authors and the history, maybe. But if you can get the skill of asking a question clearly, it will serve you well no matter what you do. And the thing that I back when I used to work with teams, I would coach the folks to do would be like to articulate the business problem and then transfer that into a research question. I think that is a skill that I gained way back and I still use to this day. And you have to really pressure yourself to say, is that really the question? Is that what we're chasing? What is the fundamental question here that we're trying to solve for?
Isn't like research kind of the final frontier for AI? Like, isn't that the thing that AI doesn't do yet? And if it were to, it would change everything. Like, have you thought about that much? Like, do you think AI is fundamentally disabled to perform research and what we do? And like, well, what is research at a fundamental level, and why is it so difficult for AI to do?
I think AI does a phenomenal job of research, actually. But a human eye has to be in charge of what's coming out and what's going in. So I think it's a fantastic tool in terms of speeding up some of the administrative processes that we had to wait through. Like right now, weeks of field work can be crunched into seconds. So we can get to insights pretty quickly. It's insane. It's really phenomenal.
Obviously, there's like deep research, and these machines are like great at research. So maybe I'm not saying it rightly, but what is it that like? Isn't it like scientific discovery? Like, is it like it's still not able to create like new findings in science? Is it? Like, what do you coin that as? Like, yes, it's able to go find stuff on the internet and give you like the culmination of what's there, but isn't there still a piece missing with AI where it's not able to like, I don't know what they say, genuinely like innovate and come up with like more frontier idea? I don't know. Like, I'm trying to kind of get at it myself. But
it has to be a conversation between the end user and AI. It's still a product, right? It's still a platform that you use, a knowledge gathering tool, for lack of a better term. And I'm sure I'm super simplifying it as I'm saying that. I get ideas from AI. I uncover things that I haven't thought about or I hadn't researched yet. I double check it to make sure that it ties up to a credible source, but it depends on how you use it. I do believe that in the hands of an expert, and by expert, I don't mean you have to be like seasoned in your field. You just have to know a lot about something to catch mistakes or to direct, most importantly, to direct that conversation back and forth with your AI agent. I think in the hands of someone like that, AI can be an incredibly powerful tool because you'll know how to direct it, and then you'll know where the gaps are, and you'll be able to say, wait, that hasn't been discussed yet. I haven't seen that around yet, or further probe, and it just gets you where you need to go faster, which is great.
So just to kind of switch gears a little bit, right? So back in 2017, you wrote a piece about people getting emotionally attached to robots, asking why we would be surprised, that people essentially bond with machines, right? So was that the seed of like where you are now, or did the AI question really grab you later?
I think the AI part came later, but I would still ask the same question. I'm fascinated by this because it's two things. It's called a parasocial relationship. And it's not too different than the crush you might have on a celebrity in a movie, because it's still not yours and not real. It's a character, right? So think of your AI bot or whatever it is that you're using for research or on a daily basis for tasks. If you use it a lot and it gives you positive feedback, we're at the end of the day, we're social creatures. There might be a dependence that develops. And I think that's fascinating. And the more you depend and the more positive results you get, say AI gave you advice as to where to travel, and you had a good time when you traveled, and you were well prepared thanks to that search you did, then that's a positive interaction. You're going to trust AI more. You're going to go back to it, use it. The cycle continues. And from that develops a relationship. Whether the other end of the parameter is real or not, that's a whole other debate, but it's called a parasocial relationship. And this happens. I think and especially I'm fascinated by the use of voice in AI, or when it comes to managing AI-driven devices, even at home. That is such an impactful thing on our brains. The power of audio, don't underestimate it ever. when you hear AI talk back to you, or when you speak to AI, that's a whole other connection. Again, it taps into our neurology and our wiring as social beings. And I see it as something completely possible.
Well, it's just funny you say that, because I've completely moved over to voice as of late.
Have you?
Like
Yeah.
all of my interactions now, let's say 99% of it is voice, and I find it to be, well, first of all, my carpal tunnel's gone, and second of all, I just find like I can capture way more nuance because it's very natural, right? Like when I'm talking to a buddy, or I'm
Right.
talking to you or anybody, I'm talking to get
You
what's in my
share more.
brain
You
out.
share more when you're talking. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you've said the business of AI is essentially like running way ahead of the users of AI, right? And that the gap became the reason for your research in your new book. When did that gap first get obvious enough that you had to go study it?
I would say a couple years ago, I was just seeing like all the news were about the business. And of course, that's natural, by the way. Um, there will be investment so that people can react to something, right? I don't think that there's nothing wrong with that cycle. I think there should be continued interest and investment in technologies that help us, that move us forward. So by all means, I'm AI forward, I'm pro technology, I'm a tech optimist. So let me share that as way of background. What I was noticing was the scale of fear and the shifts in the job market, and the hesitancy to believe in what people were getting. So that, especially the last bit, when people were getting things that were exciting because it was coming in quickly, perhaps entertaining, but not reliable, I started questioning whether there was something different about this particular technology. Because if you just think about it like a product, you don't ever want to go out to market with something that doesn't work, because you're going to be booed off the stage. But here was this incredible technology that had bubbled up to a level where the everyday person could use and get benefits from, but it wasn't working perfectly at all times. And people were still okay with it, frustrated with it, fearful of it. Like there was a whole spectrum of reactions. And I said, there's something else here that we got to dig deep into.
No, that's a really interesting observation. So, and then your central idea is AI proximity, right?
Right.
That people accept AI when it is distant and resist it when it's close. So, can you walk me through the moment that framework actually clicked for you?
Yeah. I did a study in the beginning of 2025 about all these behaviors that we're talking about, how people are adopting AI. And I had a question in there, actually inspired by an industry friend, a colleague who worked at a robotics company. And the question was, how comfortable would you be if AI, a robot or an AI driven product, did these following things for you? Um, and it was ranging from customer service at an airport, helping scientists in a lab, entertaining you on a screen, to giving your children education, taking care of elderly at home, a whole series of activities. And when I looked at the numbers that came back, I noticed that people were generally saying, first of all, there were other questions, attitudinal questions that gave me background too. They were saying, I'm okay. I think with AI moves society forward. Now that's quite different than more than half the population fearing that AI will take away their jobs. So on the one hand, they're fearful. On the other hand, they're saying this is good. This is good for general society. And then they were more likely to be okay with AI helping people that were far from them, that they were not emotionally connected to. Scientists could get help from AI, and that was a great thing. Customer service could implement with AI, and that was a useful thing. But AI could not touch their children, could not touch their parents at home. So, and there were other studies that backed this up as well. There is a particular series of studies from MIT about home care and boomers refusing to be tracked with AI-driven wearables, and they're not complying with it fully because people just feel it's too intrusive, or they don't quite understand the technology as to what it can do, and privacy issues come up. So there's a little bit of hesitation when it comes into private sphere, but people are generally okay with it if it's far from them and in the public sphere. That whole idea of proximity emerged from that question. And then I did a follow-up study because I'm a researcher. I got to verify it. And I understood that it was a pretty complex multi-factor thing. It wasn't like whether you adopt or not, whether you like or not, or whether you just have some experience with it and then you feel comfortable with AI. Because it's so different to use, say, AI on a software at work versus AI in your living room with your family. Those are two completely different contexts. So context matters a lot. The depth in which you use AI mattered a lot. I can use it to check my email, and that's a functional use. I can use it to get me in a car, to get me from point A to B without a driver. And that's a complete different integrated use of AI, where there's a lot more at stake, right? And then exposure, of course, matters. And today I feel like much of the measurement is at that level. Are we using AI? How many people are using AI? We're still bound by this concept of reach being the ultimate metric. I would advocate that we need to think in more dimensions and go deeper. Exposure, comfort with AI, which varies depending on context, and our willingness to delegate to AI. I think those four things are at play continuously, and the issue is the interaction between those things, not just one thing at a time. So it depends on
question. So I guess like I spent, I don't know, 8 years kind of at the interface of research or academia, research and industry. And, one of the questions that I'm always asking is, so what? And like, I just feel like so much of the research that's done in the world is like, just because someone's curious, but like, how do you turn that insight into like an entrepreneur that can actually build something out of it? And like, how does it play into
market opportunity,
building companies? Yeah. So can you give an example or like?
Yeah, I'm big on that too. I think the worst thing I hear after I might hear after I give a presentation is, oh, that's interesting. And then people pause there because they're curious, they were curious at one point, and then they found the information interesting but not useful or applicable. Right. Information has to be applied, to your point. So what? So, okay, AI adoption is complex. It has 4 pillars. You have to account for context and delegation and exposure. So what? The point is you have to know your audience and you have to know your interception points, meet them where they are to turn this into a viable business. If the goal is to move people along so that they adopt your employee program, so that they do the tasks you want, or they just use your product, that has AI on the back end, you have to be very craftful in positioning that product today or that program so that people apply it to their daily lives, apply it to their work, because they're not just going to come on board like that. That's the problem we have today. It's not a given. You have to convince them in different ways. And I think the in-depth study that I'm providing and the advice that I'm providing will provide a blueprint for a marketer or an executive, a strategy person to say, okay, here's how I need to navigate the space to get to what I want. If you really need to understand your audience and understand what makes them tick and what makes them coil back. Does that make sense?
Right. So, I mean, AI is everywhere. Google is AI now. I mean, my car drives itself. I mean, there's like AI is literally ubiquitous, right? And so when you use the word AI and you see these things, like I everything you've said, I mean, none of it is surprising to me. It's very natural. Like I see this all the time. People are scared of AI, and there's people who love it, and then people will be like, everything you've said so far, like totally resonates. What I'm trying to kind of get to also is just give you an example, right? Like let's say there's an entrepreneur who's building something in this space. I don't know. Let's come up with an example. Okay, I have an app. I'm trying to help founders raise capital on autopilot. Okay, so my ICP are founders. So like, how would I start mapping out like what you've discovered and figure out, like obviously these are tech savvy people, so a lot of them are not afraid of AI. In fact, they're building things with AI. So
Right.
I fall somewhere in the spectrum, and if I fall in that part of the quadrant or whatever, what does that mean? Like,
Well, you might have a bias. It depends on the distance between you and your audience. Your audience are, let's say, investors, and the investors, let's paint a picture for our audience here, are typically over 45 with significant experience in finance, and they're interested in a certain set of metrics, as to how quickly you can get things to market, what your margin is, etc. Your audience, AI savvy audience builders, might be in love with their product, might be all about the nuts and bolts of their engineering.
mhm.
And they may need a little bit of guidance to get to the point of view of the buyer on their end, the investors, who are going to pay attention to different metrics. So there's always something to bridge, and there's always some distance between the audience and the end goal. So I think that same paradigm applies there as well.
And then you also draw a sharp line between touching AI and trusting AI.
Right.
And using that using the tool and handling it a real decision are essentially completely different thresholds, right? So what in the data kind of forced you to separate those two things?
Well, there's a difference between 80+% of the population saying they've used AI, and then 59% of people saying they're fearing AI. So if you're using it but fearing it. And then the other big thing that was interesting to me was, despite all that usage, about, again, 80% wanted more training on AI. And then when you probed further and said, what kind of training do you want? And you would think like, oh, if they're using it, they must be a little bit savvy by now. They wanted the basics. Like, I want to understand how I probe. I think there's this fascination about, how do I approach this thing so that it works well for me? Going back to, again, the importance of being able to craft a good question. So for someone like you and I, who are maybe we're more tech savvy than average, and our brains are naturally geared towards like crafting questions and digging things and asking why. Don't take that as the baseline. Think of like the person on the street, the person in the shop, and you can't expect everyone to be as articulate or as in-depth thinkers or in the moment give what AI needs. So I think there's a lot of still need for hand holding if you're thinking about the general population. I'm not talking about the tech savvy founders. And then I thought that was interesting. Like, if we're using it so much, whether we're aware of it or not, but then we still need all this help, but then there's this willingness to learn more. And are we helping those people? Is there an opportunity here to come in with the right program or the right approach to bring them on board and to have a whole new market?
Yeah.
Those are questions.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is to help like Uber Uber drivers all the time, right? They're always like, we're talking about AI, and they have a similar kind of vibe, like, oh, I'm scared of it and I don't even know how to learn about it.
But they're using it.
They use it, but usually I'll just be like, have you tried using AI to help you understand AI?
Yeah.
It can work well. Like, you can ask AI, like, how do I prompt better, or how do I ask better questions? And but it's the first time in history that we've had a tool like that, right, where you could literally ask it and it just like talks to you. So to me, the fear is more just like people not even really engaging with it. Like, they'll engage with it at a very peripheral level, like on the free ChatGPT. Oh, I asked it, what's the meaning of life, right, or something like that, once or twice. And then they just kind of give up. But even this idea that you can use AI to learn AI, I think it's a bit meta. Like I said, most people haven't even thought of that. At least that I've come across.
Curiosity is a whole different thing, and it doesn't come from just education. I know we talked a lot about education at the beginning. There's a lot to be said about psychographics and adding to demographics when we have to understand AI. So the way marketers' lens usually work is age and gender. Are women adapting AI? Are we reaching 35 plus? Those will be common questions you hear in the hallways of a media organization or an agency. But going back to your Uber driver example, that person may well be super curious and may want to dig back into it with their phone when, or when they're in front of a computer, and that has nothing to do with their demographic, education, or income, but a lot to do with their psychographic, which is their attitude. They're proactive. They're they seek opportunities. They're optimists. They're forward-looking. So I think we have to get into the psychographics a little bit more when we're trying to make sense of the landscape.
Interesting. So I guess, I didn't realize how fast the time has been going, but tell me about Iris Flex in your own words. When a founder or like a CMO comes to you, what's the actual problem you're solving that they can't solve for themselves?
A lot of the questions I'm getting is, who's my audience and where is the opportunity? A lot of times we're doing segmentation, meaning taking the population that they want to reach and dividing into meaningful groups and saying, okay, here are the people who will drive your business, and this is what they look like, and this is what they feel like, this is how they act. And here are the people who may be, dragging your business down or wasting your marketing dollars. And so we show them where the opportunities are, who will propel their business, and who they can maybe deprioritize and not spend marketing dollars on.
And your new book, right, AI for Marketing, is the consumer's perspective, not the builder's. So what's the argument in it that you think the industry most needs to hear and is least kind of like ready for?
The differences between audience groups. I think that's the thing that if I can tell them, like, read this book, because you have to understand how a Gen Z will approach AI differently than a boomer, and that's a big gap. Or how women approach AI in the workplace or in general. Women hold purchasing power. They make majority of household purchasing decisions. And today we have a landscape where women have a lot of privacy issues and ethical issues around AI, much more so than men because they're more discerning. So how do you solve for that when you're trying to sell products geared towards women, or when you have to go through the mom to get to the house? So you have to really understand the different groups in your audience and understand how they think and behave towards AI. There's also a fascinating study that I quote in the book from KPMG that says 50% of people globally using social media do not know that there's AI on the back end of it. So a lot of us, to your point, are touching this, experiencing it, but they don't hear or see the frame AI. So as a business person, if you're packaging your product or service with an AI-heavy message, you might be alienating some people who actually want to get into it. You might be drawing tech-forward people, but alienating the mainstream people. So you have to really be nuanced with your strategy, understand your audience, and keep asking questions to make sure the experience is optimal.
Awesome.
It's always B2B to C. I always think that way. Even if it's B2B, it's always B2B to C. At the end of the day, you're serving the customer.
Yeah. Cool. Well, awesome. Well, I see we have quite a few people listening. Thank you all for tuning in. Where do people learn more about you and your company? And
Sure.
Maybe we can land the plane with that one.
Yeah. It's irisflex.com. And also on LinkedIn, I'm happy to address any questions people might have, either as comments or direct message, doesn't matter.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, just hang out for like 1 minute. I'm going to bring this stream to an end.